Welcome to the Breakfast Leadership Show, where we interview global thought leaders on business, leadership, and life. Here's your host, keynote speaker, best-selling author, and chief burnout officer of the Breakfast Leadership Network, Michael Levitt.
Welcome back. I've got Mike on the line. Hey, Mike, how are you?
I am great, Michael. Thank you for having me, man.
Oh, you know what? I was on your show not too long ago, so thank you for allowing me to be on that show, and then looking forward to this conversation, because I know one of the things you do, and we'll dive into it in a minute, is you're big on systems, and I'm a routine systems type of person, not only in work life, but just in my personal life as well, because it just makes my life easier. So I want to share a little bit about you, and then we'll dive into the conversation.
Yeah, sure. So I'm an entrepreneur. That's how I identify myself. I've started a couple of businesses and sold them. But I think my entrepreneurial career actually began on a curb outside of my house when I was 4 years old. And at that time, we lived across the street from a construction company, and I would sit on the curb in the afternoons in the summer some days, and I would watch the guys bring back their trucks and their equipment. And I was just so, I don't know, in love with everything about it, like the noise and the smoke and the smell and the guys. And I thought to myself, as a 4-year-old could, which is not, that advanced, but I thought to myself, how do you do something like that, right? And then I packed that away, Michael, and did what you do. You go to school, you play sports, and all the way through college, I was sort of just focused on, how do I get a job? And I started driving a garbage truck between my junior and senior year in college. And that started to shift me a little bit, right? It's kind of it didn't take me to like, hey, I want to own these things, but it took me to like, I want to be around them. It sort of reminded me of that curb thing. And when I graduated, I got a job with a very large waste management company. And I thought, and I was doing really well, and I was moving around. I started as a management trainee, and I ended up as a divisional vice president in less than 5 years. But then, I got the rug sort of pulled out from underneath me when I got fired one day. It was actually on St. Patrick's Day, 1992. And I thought I was maybe going to run this company one day. And instead, my boss came up and he told me that they didn't need my services anymore. And I was really lost at that time. But it was, it turned out to be a great thing, because a couple of months later, I ran into a person who happened to be a farmer, believe it or not. And his name was Butch. And Butch, we started talking about what it would be like to maybe start a business together. Neither one of us had any experience or anything. But I like to think of it as like Butch was sort of that farmer that came along, and he germinated that long dormant seed that had been planted on me when I was 4 years old out in front of my parents' house. And after that, we were kind of off to the races.
That's a great reminder, because I think many of us, and some maybe not, but I think many of us have been in that situation where we're in an organization, we think things are going great, and we have a long plan ahead of us, and then we get that meeting, and the next thing you know, they're handing us bankers boxes, and we're boxing our stuff up. If they allow you to do that, I've had some situations where I was like, nope, you got to leave. We'll ship it to you. And like, okay, well,
that's what happened to me. I had it.
Yeah, that's, and including the dried up cup of coffee, which I found was a little odd. I'm like, really? You didn't even want to rinse it out? It was obviously all dried up, but it was like, I looked at him like, and of course I threw the mug away. I'm like, I'm not even going to bother. Oh. But, and that was their mug anyway. It wasn't mine, but thanks for sending me an old cup of coffee. But it's earth shattering, and it is, especially if you're in an organization, you're like, you know what, nothing makes me happier just to be out of here, then that's one thing. But when you're like, okay, this is going along, I've had a ton of success, and then all of a sudden there's a shift. And I remember the first time that I was dehired, using a Jack Welch term, from an organization. It was with a Fortune 500 organization, and they did a 20% cut across the board. So it wasn't picking on me. Certainly felt that way, but I was part of a big group of people that were given the same type of messaging that day, and understood it, but it was still quite a shock because I'd never happened to me before at that point. After a couple times after that, now it's like, oh, okay, well, I know the routine here, right? This is what I got to do. Reach out to my network. I suppose
like anything, you can get a little bit used to how these things go, right? But
it's never pleasant though. And right. I will say this, being on both sides of the fence, I stand firmly in this, that it's harder to let somebody go than it is to be let go. That's, if you've never had the options for both, then you may not agree with me, but being on the other side of it and letting somebody go is not a pleasant experience, because you feel personally responsible in a way of disrupting somebody's life. And that's not a pleasant thing for any of us. So you have this meeting with this farmer, and you're like, all right, let's launch a business. Neither one of us have really had this experience before, but why not? Let's be pioneers and figure this out. So, obviously that, was the seeds to plant you to, all the work that you've done since then. So, what were some of the highlights from that, and, some things that, carried forward and all the things you've been doing?
Well, for me, it was the initial highlight was at a time in my life where I had basically zero confidence, coming off of this termination. I did go back, found a job almost right away for another company. I thought, okay, like rebound, it's like a rebound relationship. And I thought, okay, this is going to be great. Right. And I got there, and there was a guy that I ended up working for. His name was Don, and Don was not a pleasant person to work with. So unpleasant that within 30 days, I just couldn't go there anymore. I was like physically ill on the way to work, driving to work, for any of you who've had that experience. And I just couldn't do it. And that made me feel like a failure again, like twice. I get fired, and then I can't keep a job for more than a month. So I think the number one thing that Butch brought to me, besides this germination thing that I talked about, was some confidence. Like somebody who, for the first time, besides my wife, somebody who for the first time in a couple of months really said something to me that made me think like I had value again. And that went a long way. Like I just needed that little something, that little belief system that I was challenged with. And it was fun, because once he did that, we sort of gathered around his kitchen table and just started spitballing ideas of what we could do. And we drank some Miller High Lifes while we were doing it, which made it seem like much better, idea, and much easier than it probably turned out to be. But just like finding someone who gave me a little bit of confidence was really what I needed, Michael, to say, yeah, I can. If he believes in me, I believe in me, and I can do this. And that was fantastic to get us started.
Yeah, definitely having a champion by your side is helpful to remind you that, yes, you are capable, because, losing a job and then going into a toxic work environment, which unfortunately there's way too many of those around, can really make you second guess on your ability to do anything, which is just really, really bad language that you're using on yourself.
Right.
It's the programming that we have. We are our own worst judge. We beat ourselves up better than anybody else could, whether it was Mike Tyson or anybody else. We do a better job of really hitting ourselves, and we need to turn the dial and say, no, you know what? I was successful. I am successful. I'm able to do things. Look at what I did at that waste management company and rose through the ranks as fast as I did. And yeah, I picked the wrong organization because the environment wasn't right for me. It's not, it was that environment wasn't right for you. And simple conversations and having somebody stand by your side and say, no, this isn't you. This is just external things. You are still the same awesome person you've always been. You're continuing to grow. You're continuing to learn. And, John Maxwell wrote a book, Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn. That's a great example of it. It's like every experience that I've had, positive, negative, or indifferent, is a learning opportunity for me to grow, both personally and professionally. And again, you find those champions in your life that, they're not going to blow sunshine up your backside, but they're going to encourage you and tell you things that are true and remind you, yes, this is the reality of things. Yes, you are a great person. You're a great employee. You're a great entrepreneur, and you're going to do great things. Having those people in your life are going to help you, take those next steps to be successful, no matter what you do.
Let me jump on two things you said there, because I think that you're right. The first, this champion you talked about, I think it's very important, no matter where you are in your life, whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're just, working in a cubicle, wherever you are, it's really important to have people around you who build your confidence, because the world and the grind and just normal everyday life is sort of designed to beat up your confidence, to erode it, to take it away. And without that person or persons in your life who, as you say, they're not blowing sunshine, they're just giving you confidence. They're optimistic. They're helping you see the bright side when all you see is the dark side. That's super important. And then the other thing you said, with I call it the stories you tell yourself. We're really, really good at self-sabotage. We're really, really good at telling ourselves stories that aren't true, but we choose to believe them. And that's very dangerous, right? You don't want to put thoughts into your mind or stories into your mind that aren't yours, that you don't own, that aren't the stories you want to be telling about yourself. And it's so easy to do it. But it's something that you really need to protect, the stories that you tell yourself, because the stories you tell yourself become who you are.
It's important. It's a great segue into the stories about your book. So let's dive into your book. I always ask authors this: why in the world would you give up so much of your time, of your life, to write a book? Because it's time consuming. It's not a weekend adventure for many. Right. What's the book about, and what prompted you to really want to get this out into the world?
Yeah, thank you. So the book is called Ownership, and the subtitle is How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck. And the book is really about my belief that the entrepreneurial journey is about going big. And even though I position it that way, the book is really relevant to anyone who is a leader, because all leaders sort of tend to go down on this journey. And, the journey has 4 sort of stages to it. And the first stage is the dream stage of the journey. And whether you're, an executive, or whether you're a leader of some kind, or whether you're an entrepreneur, you get into whatever you get into with this sort of dream that it's going to be fantastic. It's going to be great. And you need that to get started, because 95% of the people will never have that dream and act on that dream. So you need that, but a lot of times that dream starts to fade away pretty quickly when all the demands of actually doing what you're doing come to be realized. The things that you didn't think about or didn't want to think about when you were only thinking about dreaming. And I call that the grind stage. And the grind stage is that stage where, as we were talking about, where you do not have a system in place to protect your confidence. You don't have a system in place to, actually keep you moving forward. And as a result, you get stuck in today. You get stuck in the present, and you make yourself, a lot of times, like I did, I made myself sort of the hero of my story, and I valued myself on the number of things I could do, Michael, not the number of things that I wanted to do or the number of things that were most important. And the third stage, if you get too deep into the grind, is what I call the break stage. And the break stage is when you just fall into this deep valley. I call it the valley of uncertainty in the book. And that's a place where leaders and entrepreneurs go when they just don't know where to go. They don't see a future anymore. They only see, the same as what they have now continuing. And they don't want that. It hurts. And, it's a place where they go to like just blame look for someone to blame or look for a way to go back or look, they're just searching. And then the fourth stage, which is the cool stage, is the breakthrough stage. That's when you start to figure out that, oh, wait a minute, I had this dream. It turned into a grind, ended up in a break. But when I look at it, it's really a byproduct. This break is a byproduct of a system that I created. Maybe I didn't intentionally create it, but I created it, and it led me exactly where I designed it to lead me, which is right here in this valley of uncertainty. So if I can design a system that does that and it works so effectively, surely I can design a system that gets me out of this valley and gets me back on the track to making breakthroughs and going big with my life and my business and whatever, my relationships. And so that's what the book is about. And it's told through my stories, and I use mine because they're the only ones I have. But as you're reading it, you'll be replacing my stories with your stories, the ones that resonate with you as you go through the journey. And it's really a book of hope, at the end that you get into this to go big. There's a lot of forces working against you on that. Sometimes they'll get the best of you, but let's move past that and let's let's design a way to keep us out of the valley as much as possible and always focused on the breakthroughs that we can make.
There's one thing that really jumped out at me in all of that and all those four stages or steps is the fact that you recognize that I have systems that have got me to this point. Mm-hmm. Why can't I create a system that can get me through this particular situation? And it reminds me of years and years ago, I worked for a division of Daimler-Benz, and it was the first company that I'd ever worked for. And it was in this asset management division that they had. And we, as consultants, would go into organizations and help these organizations get a better understanding of their assets. Because a lot of companies, small, medium, and large, don't do the best job of keeping track of all of their equipment, their assets, and everything like that, cost involved, replacement, things like that. Because if you get really granular in those things, what can happen is you can have a better understanding of when you might need to replace some things in your inventory or in your fleet or whatnot. And if you're on top of it, it's more preventative than reactive. And prevention is cheaper than reactive. I can pretty much identify thousands of examples of that, but we'll be here all day if I went through all of those. But the one thing this organization did at the end of every project, what we would do is the team that was working on this project would gather together, and we'd also bring in some consultants from other projects at the time, and we'd have basically a debrief. But we went through, okay, what went well? What did we learn from this project? Any new discoveries, anything that we think might work out in other projects that we're working on or whatnot? What didn't? And we'd have everybody provide feedback as to what worked well, what didn't, what are some ideas that may have helped to make this project go a little bit smoother. And by doing that over a period of time, what we found was we were able to get more efficient with the projects that we were working on, which meant that we could actually take on more project work without bringing on additional people. And we became more efficient at that. We grew the business and the division by doing that, just by, hey, what worked? And it was amazing to me at how many companies I've worked for that had never done that exercise. So any company that I had any type of input in or was leading, that was one of the things that I implemented, was a true debrief meeting. And I'd bring in as many people as I could and say, okay, what worked, what didn't? Okay, Bill, you weren't on this project, but if you were in this situation, do you see anything that you think may have helped us to be better in something? And everyone would provide input, and we all got better. Yeah. And that was a system that I had inputted in, and they're like, wow, no one's ever done that before. And I'm like, to me, it seems like common sense, but, and I always like to have a joke, there's a big focus on artificial intelligence and AI and stuff like that. I think we should probably work on artificial common sense first before we get to the intelligence, because there's a lack of common sense in some areas. And I'm going to stop there because that could go into all kinds of bad directions. But I want to highlight that.
Yeah, I'm curious, as you were talking there, did you debrief your wins as well as your losses, let's say? Definitely.
And actually another organization that didn't celebrate a win. And I've talked about this on my show before. I was working for a nonprofit organization that had a furniture bank and a food bank for lower income individuals. And this organization every week would rent a rental truck. And I'm not going to mention names of those companies, but we all know who they are. And unfortunately, in many cases, those trucks tend to break down quite a bit. So here we are with a truck full of food that needs to be transported to a food bank area, and it's dead on the side of the road. So we have to get a replacement truck, and they're not quick with that. It's not like calling AAA and they just show up with a tow truck or a new truck and say, here you go. The logistics were pretty problematic. So over time, we started working with our different funders and like, look, we want to see if we can buy our own truck. And we ended up finding a used one, which was in a completely different part of the country. But one of our directors was going down to that area because they had family and friends. They're going to vacation. So we were able to configure it in such a way where they would go down, we'd fly them down, we paid for their transportation, and one of them drove the truck back to our operations. By buying that one truck, that increased our ability to deliver and pick up food for the food bank by 100% increase. And then, years down the road, I don't work for that organization anymore, but I see they have a handful of furniture trucks and food trucks. So that was a spark.
Okay.
And in the meeting that we had, basically announced, so the truck is here. We're starting to use it. It was our CEO basically spent 2 minutes on it and then moved on. And I looked at the director who was leading that thing, and she looked dejected. And after the meeting, I gathered a couple other directors. I said, come on, let's go out to lunch. So we went to lunch, and we made it a celebration lunch. It's like, we're going to celebrate this. This is a huge deal. How many meals are we providing to families? This is not like we got a truck. No, this is a gigantic deal. And of course, that was a spark for all the other things. So to answer your question, most organizations that I was a part of, we made sure, no, you need to celebrate these things and look at them of what went well. What can we learn from this win? And championship teams in sports, they should do that as well. What did we do well? Just like when they go, okay, we blew this play, and okay, we missed this coverage, or maybe we should have shifted differently depending on what sport you're playing. But the ones that win, it's like, what did we do to win? And those are the teams. I'll pick on UCLA back in the John Wooden days.
Right.
And they were winning titles after titles. Okay, maybe the talent wasn't the great across all the college teams. But just because you're the most talented doesn't mean you're going to win. You can look at the New York Yankees in the early 90s. They were spending tons of money, and it was a team full of all-stars, and they weren't winning anything. They bring in a manager, and they bring in a couple key utility players that, quite frankly, on any other team probably wouldn't be Hall of Fame players. And all of a sudden, they started winning a lot. Mm-hmm. Why? Because they had the right mix in place, and they got a system, and it just helped to have Derek Jeter too. But but it still allowed them to win. That was the system. The Detroit Red Wings won cups and were in the playoffs for 25 straight years. Why? They had a system. Anybody that the Patriots, you can go in sports, you can look in business as well. Businesses that are thriving, individuals that are thriving. How are they doing it? It's not luck. It's preparation. It's systems.
Right.
It's so yeah, to answer your question, whenever I can in organizations I've been a part of, definitely you celebrate those wins.
Good. Yeah. That's been a challenge for me, but it's definitely necessary. I believe. Got to look at both.
Exactly. So another thing you do as well is you've got coaching program as well. So why don't you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I coach high level entrepreneurs from 10 to 250 million in sales. And what I help them with is basically what the journey that I took people through in the book, Michael. It's really, helping them to imagine and get clear about the futures they actually want and what they need to be doing in order to, reach that future and tap that potential and get the life that they say they want. It's amazing that, these the people that I'm working with are successful by most measures, by most outside measures, and even some inside measures. But there's something that they just have trouble getting past. They want something that they can't figure out how to get. And my job and my role working with them is to, first of all, let's get really clear about what you actually want, because it's one thing to say it and it's another thing to, believe it. And once we believe it, how can we work together to make sure that it happens? How can we identify what's in the way of it happening right now and get rid of that? And how can we identify what's needed in order for it to happen and put that into place?
It's critically important. And yeah, I agree. A lot of people, they think they know what they want, but when they actually start peeling back the layers, they realize actually there's something else that they want. And your program and your book obviously helps bring light to that and gets people focused. And again, going back to what we talked about a moment ago, it helps you design some systems in order to make that happen. And that's as simplistic as it sounds, just like, the work that I do with organizations and people on burnout. It's simple to end your burnout, but it's really hard if you don't have a system in place and follow through with it and get crystal clear as to, what's the outcome you want. And sometimes people can't even describe what's the outcome that they want.
And on top of that too, you have to have a willingness to change. I think people can be in pain, but it's not so painful that they're not, that they're willing to change. And it's hard to change somebody who's not willing to change, right? So it takes a lot of work as a coach, doing what you do or what I do to actually cut through that. Like, are you actually willing to change? Because if you're not, there's probably not going to be a big benefit to us working together. But if you are, that's a whole different story.
Yeah. That's when the magic can happen. So
yeah,
Mike, I've loved this conversation. Where can people find out more about you and all this awesome work you do?
Well, best place is my website, which is my name, Mike Malatesta, MALATESTA.com. My book, my coaching, my podcast, information about me. It's all there. Go there. And if you want to connect, hit me up.
Well, thank you. And I'll definitely have all the information in the show notes. So again, Mike, thank you so much for your time today. Thanks again for having me on your show as well, and continued success in everything you do.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on your wonderful show, Michael.
Thanks for listening to the Breakfast Leadership Show, part of the Breakfast Leadership Network. Visit breakfastleadership.com for tips on empowering your business and your life.